Hi everyone. So we're here with Benjamin James, and this is our DMD Profiles series, just looking at the lives of adults with DMD and just asking about their experiences and their journey so far. So thanks for joining us. And yeah, Benjamin, if you'd like to introduce yourself.
So yeah, I'm Benjamin. I'm 23 years old. I live in South London, or just on the edge, just in Surrey, in Worcester Park. And I have recently just finished a master's in science communication from the University of Sheffield. So I've been home and adapting to being at home since September. And now I'm looking for work, whether that's in the charity sector or in that area of healthcare communications. Outside of this, I enjoy music. Not that I do that enough of it, or not as much as I'd like, but I try and I like to DJ. I quite like creating playlists on Spotify, or reading lots of different things. And also, I quite like to go sailing. Not that I can do that at the moment, but that's been good.
Oh, that's great. Yeah, thank you. Yeah, thanks so much for joining us and kind of sharing your experience. It's yeah, really great to see someone clearly thriving with Duchenne. So I want to kind of just start off really by asking you, what it was like for you growing up with Duchenne, really.
Yeah, I think I've always felt that at a young age I've had good support, and from my consultants and physios. And I suppose, apart from having the 6-monthly or every 3 months having an appointment, I never really saw myself as having Duchenne, because when you're younger, you know there's something wrong, but you don't really, it doesn't affect you so much, so you don't notice. And that's probably, it's the same, that was how things were for the first 7 or 8 years of my life. I was just like any other child, really. I mean, I did have some behavioural and learning difficulties, but fortunately, I had good support at school from the head teacher and my teachers. So I got the early interventions that meant I could progress and kind of overcome some of those challenges. But then I suppose when I started steroid medication, so I was about 7, and this was just at the start when there was increasing research suggesting that you should be starting steroid medication, and it was a choice that was given to, well, my mum, who made the ultimate decision. And I suppose initially when you start taking steroids, you put on a lot of weight, and I suppose at that point I perhaps realised more the impact that Duchenne might have on me, and struggled with weight for a bit. But other than that, again, I was still like any other child. I could still do a lot, and didn't really associate myself with perhaps the Duchenne community. But then over the years, sort of realised, oh yeah, I do have this condition. It's okay. Oh, this is what it could look like for me. And then I moved, went up to secondary school, and I'd say I didn't have such a good time at secondary school. Primary school was great. I felt really accepted and was supported a lot. And then secondary school was just like, no, the support wasn't great. I wasn't, for example, my mum specifically asked that I could be in a class with somebody that I knew from growing up, and that never happened. And I didn't have any of that. And in a way, the support was at my secondary school was more geared up to people who had learning needs, and it was great for that. But physical needs, just wasn't really understood, and I suppose I felt like I stuck out a lot, and I was shorter than my peers, and because of the side effects of steroids, and I was kind of picked on because of that, and you kind of just get on with it yourself. And I had a few friends, but never felt like I really was understood. And even in PE, I wasn't always helped to be encouraged to get involved, or at least I didn't have the same support and the support that I needed. But I would say I kind of excelled at secondary school, made the most of it, and again, never really necessarily associated myself with having the condition, or at least I wasn't as involved in the community. But then, you know, as I've got older, I got more involved.
Yeah, I think secondary school can often be a very challenging time. You know, kids aren't generally very
No.
understanding of difference sometimes. So yeah, it can be a challenge.
Yeah.
And what kind of school was it that you went to? Was it a mainstream school, or was it like a special school?
No, so it was a mainstream school. And I mean, one of the reasons we chose it when we were looking is because it was one of the smaller secondary schools. It had a lift, so we were thinking ahead if I needed to use the lift, because at the time I didn't. I was quite stubborn in saying no, I'm going to go up the stairs because I could do that. Perhaps sometimes it may be not the safest thing, but I felt happy to do that. Although the teachers tried to persuade me otherwise, I wanted to just try and maintain that physical ability I had as long as I could.
So you said about not really getting very involved in PE. Were there kind of opportunities for you to get other kind of physical therapy or hydrotherapy, that kind of thing?
I didn't. It's something we talked about, but at the time, well, at the beginning of secondary school, when I was 11, 12, probably about 13, I was still doing karate, but then that became harder and harder, and I struggled to get off the floor, and you know, kind of stop that. But I mean, I've always had a physio regime that's been given to me, and you know, since I've been young, I've been quite determined and stubborn in doing it. I'm disciplined in making sure I did my own physiotherapy, and swimming as well. We still went swimming then, so it's kind of, I took it into my own hands, really.
Okay, and you mentioned about getting support early on around kind of learning challenges. I mean, you've clearly demonstrated that you've kind of overcome those challenges. I just wondered if you know, you want to say a bit more about kind of what kind of support you got.
So I was fortunate enough to have sort of, I was put in smaller groups and have one-to-one interventions for reading and writing. I mean, for a while I was kind of kept in the bottom set, even though I was capable of doing more. But in a way that actually it enabled me to have the one-to-one intervention and sort of flagged up the fact that I did need support. You know, sort of dyslexic-like tendencies. So I struggled with getting the order of words right, or you know, I'd miss mistake. I didn't read questions properly, or I misunderstood, or you know, if I was given too many instructions, it would just be too much. So that one-to-one intervention meant I could be out of the class, not all the time, you know, because otherwise that would feel quite isolating. But you know, they did have sessions, and sometimes that was quite frustrating, especially as I was progressing and getting better, and perhaps I needed to be pushed more. But I think because of that intervention, it helped me grow out of some of the issues that are associated with Duchenne.
Yeah. And yeah, clearly you have succeeded from then. So you know, it's clearly an example of where the intervention can have a good effect. And so did you feel during your school, I mean, how were you kind of treated in terms of like aspirations for the future and kind of expectations on you? Were you kind of supported and encouraged about your potential, or were there any times at which, you know, you were treated as if your kind of future was more limited?
I didn't necessarily feel like that, although Mum remembers one of the teachers when she questioned her about saying, "Oh, I think he needs to be moved up." She was very dismissive and was like, "Oh no, we'll just keep him there."
Right.
You know, like oh no, we won't, try and push him. So that's the only time I remember, perhaps. But the other teachers were very supportive, and I think I had a good, well, I know they call it an education health care plan, but it wasn't called that at the time. But I had a sort of education plan, which obviously was helpful.
And do you remember when you were younger, did you have any particular aspirations? You know, what you wanted to be when you grow up, kind of thing?
I think at one point I wanted to be an architect. I can't think of any. I think architect or involved in the music industry in some way.
Yeah. Is there anything about that particularly appealed to you?
I think particularly for the music side, it's like a passion of mine and something that I continue to pursue when I have time. And I suppose the aspect of the music industry. So I wanted to be like a sound engineer. The aspect of working with people and whilst also enjoying music and being creative and also hands-on. But obviously, sort of as I got older, and so at secondary school, I did GCSE. Well, I did a BTEC in music technology, and then I did 1 year in A levels of music tech. But because my condition was getting worse, physically I couldn't do this physical side of it, and so I decided to go down a different route.
I see. Yeah, and so did you or do you play any kind of instrument?
Yes, so I play the drums and piano, and with the drums, when I was been 16, something like that. I was in a band, so I went to the Realistic Rock Academy, Music Academy, and they supported me in just playing the drums and put me in a band. So that was good fun.
What was the band called?
So I was in, I think the first band I was in was called Red Wires, and I'm trying to remember the name of the second band. I can't actually remember off the top of my head, but I've been in 2 different bands.
Yeah,
which was good fun. I did that about once a week.
Yeah, that sounds great. Don't think I really have a musical brain in my body, but I appreciate the music. Is there any particular type of music you're into?
I like all sorts of music, really. I couldn't really say I like one genre. I don't like heavy metal and that sort of thing, but everything else I'm up to, listening to. And
what kind of music did you used to play in the band?
So it was rock or indie rock. The sort of style we went for.
Yeah, that sounds good. And kind of like reflecting on what you said about your kind of school experience, if you're kind of thinking about parents that are kind of making the decision for their children as to what school to send them to, I mean, what would be your perspective if they're having to choose between a kind of mainstream school and a special school?
I think so. I suppose the advantage with a special school is it is geared up to dealing with your needs and your changing needs, and they perhaps have a better attitude in trying to make you feel included and supporting you. But the advantage of going to a mainstream school is you mix with all sorts of different people, with not just people with specific needs. But I think I was fortunate enough that I live in London and that area where there's lots of choice of different schools, and one of the factors was, does it have a lift? How big is it? And the general feel. I think that was the biggest decision, and also whether people there. If you've got friends or people of, because that can really help you sort of feel comfortable and happy, and maybe you feel like you have somebody who you could go to or develop a friendship with. I'd say that is probably more important, is that you feel welcomed and happy and not like all on your own.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely. Hmm. And you mentioned using steroids and dealing with the side effects of those. So when did you start using steroids?
Must be about 7 or 7.
Mm. And yeah, how did they kind of affect you? Did you experience side effects, and kind of how did you deal with that?
I experienced the weight gain and the chubby cheeks,
Mm.
and the stunted growth, chubby cheeks. Those are the two major ones. But fortunately, I didn't have delayed puberty,
Mm-hmm.
and any of that, so I haven't needed any interventions for that.
Yeah, looking back, do you appreciate having been on steroids? Is that something you think was the right decision for you?
I think for me it was, and that has probably contributed to me staying on my feet for so long. And even now I can still walk and get out of my chair. So I would definitely say that has helped. I can't say, obviously I don't know, but I'm pretty sure that they have prolonged my walking ability, for sure.
And so you were involved in the Taking Charge project with Action Duchenne about
Yeah.
kind of thinking and planning for your future. I mean, can you say a bit about what impact that had on you?
I think one of the biggest things is it just made me think about what was possible, what I actually wanted, and how I could go about that. And also just the advice of the different organizations and support that actually was available that you wouldn't really know of unless you spoke to other people. And that input was very useful. And I think we've got quite a lot of notes between me and Mum of, where we've attended sessions, and we've had Celine or Janet say, "Oh, have you heard of this?" Or "You could do this." And I think just when people actually sit you down and ask you questions, it just makes you think a bit more and perhaps make a sort of plan of what you want to do and not limit yourself, I think.
Yeah, no, definitely. And so after school, you decided to go on to university.
Yeah.
What kind of made you decide that was what you wanted to do?
I suppose I've always enjoyed learning things, and I think I wanted to pursue the opportunity of living away from home
Mm-hmm.
and trying to do things on my own, or at least with some support.
Yeah.
I think, the opportunity for independence, that's probably one of the biggest things, and also just interested in learning things.
Yeah. So what did you decide to study for your first degree?
So I studied neuroscience. So I was always interested in biology, and then through my A levels, I was made aware of neuroscience, and I thought, oh, that sounds interesting. Quite a growing field. And I think part of it was I had a really good biology teacher, who I would say I looked up to, who inspired me to study biology and supported me in that. And also it was an alternative to pursuing a career in sound engineering, because I realized that might not be practical, not impossible, but the challenges around that, especially as my needs were, the condition was progressing, needed more help, perhaps was better to keep as a hobby, which I try and do now, and pursue it as a career.
Okay. What was the name of your biology teacher?
I think, no, I don't think I know her name was Miss Hogg.
Cool. I'm sure she'd be delighted to hear that she kind of helped shape your direction in life.
Yeah, she certainly helped.
Cool. And tell me about the kind of process of going to university, just like generally. So what was that like to kind of get that all arranged?
I think the initial application process is pretty straightforward, and obviously the school support you in that and run sessions on that side of actually deciding what you want. They run UCAS sessions and all of that. So that's pretty straightforward. It's the next bit around organising open days, and obviously needing to arrange support with disability support, looking at accommodation, and really thinking about, can this place meet my needs? Can accommodation meet my needs? And then asking questions around what other support, what academic support is available. And I would say that actually university are very much geared up to supporting you, and they want to really help you and would go out of their way to make sure you can fit in. I mean, not every university is the same, but as a general rule, I found them far better than the support I had at secondary school.
Yeah.
And pretty straightforward to arrange a meeting, and the processes around that are good. But I would say it's the most important things are making sure you meet disability support and talk to them and see how you feel and what support they can give you, and making sure accommodation, can make the changes that are needed if they are needed, or they can make sure that you are supported where you live.
So did you go to look at many different universities?
I looked at about 6, I think. Yeah, 6 that I, prioritized.
Yeah. Which one did you end up going to?
So I chose, so it was between Manchester and Nottingham, but I chose Nottingham.
What was it about Nottingham that kind of clinched the deal?
I think the biggest thing was that it was a really nice campus. So it was in a park. It's, University Park. It's in nice green space, and it just felt right. I suppose I went with my gut feeling, and also the course. Seemed like it would be really good there. Although, it would have been good at the other places. I think the biggest thing was it was a nice campus, and pretty, easy to get around.
Yeah, that's good. So you mentioned about walking and using a wheelchair. I think when you were 18, do you want to tell me a bit more about kind of that process, really?
Yeah. So in terms of sort of, looking for chairs, it's quite tricky. It's quite tricky when you are still mobile but needing more help. So I'd say from the age of 16 onwards, things were getting slowly more challenging. I wasn't walking as far, or struggling to, do some of those things. I wasn't doing karate because I couldn't stand up off the floor, or, crawl off the floor. And I wasn't going swimming as much, not because I couldn't swim, but it was just, just didn't do it as much. But then the process was, we did get in contact with wheelchair services, but I think they weren't as supportive as they could be, because I could still walk. But, if I didn't have the chair, then actually I wouldn't be doing as much. I wouldn't be getting out as much. So it would have a greater impact on me. So there wasn't that much help they could provide. And so I had to raise money to fund the chair privately.
Right.
Because at that stage, they wouldn't support me to fund, provide any funding. But then it is quite hard to actually choose a powered chair, because there's so many out there. And it's just like, what is it that you want from it? But we looked at a few, and we had an assessment by one of the companies we went to, but he wasn't a trained OT. So I think posture-wise, I perhaps haven't got the best chair. I'm not completely uncomfortable, but things that you don't think about, I think it probably has put my shoulders up too much, so that struggle with that. But yeah, it's more challenging to go through the process if you're actually walking at the time. But it's frustrating, because it's like, well, then if I wasn't walking, I'd be isolated because I couldn't get out. So you actually need it before you feel like that. But we did get there. We did raise the money for it, and the chair. I got the chair 2 days before going to university, and away I went. So yeah.
It feels like a shame that you had to go through that kind of process of having to fundraise rather than being able to get that support.
Yes, definitely. And I mean, I would now. I have been assessed again because I'm thinking of getting a new chair, and started that process. Because things have changed. It's different now. They will support me.
Yeah. And how did it feel for you, kind of psychologically, starting to use the chair? Was it Was it liberating, or was it a kind of something you didn't really want to do?
I think it was liberating, and I didn't really have enough time to process it. I just got on with it because I didn't have any other choice, I suppose.
Right.
But it did feel liberating. You know, I didn't have to worry about, you know, when I was out, you know, falling over, or
Yeah.
you know, you didn't have that worry that you wouldn't be able to keep up with the people, and it just gave you that security and confidence.
Yeah. Yeah. And so, in terms of like living at university, did you live in university accommodation?
I did in first year, and I would recommend that to anyone because you know, it was in catered accommodation, so I didn't have to worry about food, which was good. And yeah, that's that. You know, that's what I'd say. I would recommend staying in first year. Most people do anyway, and it's how you can make friends, and just it's quite convenient for getting to lectures and all of that.
Yeah, definitely. So what happened after the first year in terms of accommodation?
So actually, first year I was so for second year I was approached by a couple of people that I knew through church, and they were in a flat and were looking for somebody because one of their flatmates was going to be moving out, and it wasn't the best property. And looking back, I don't know how I managed in there, but we made it work. We had to make a couple of changes, like putting a ramp up so I could actually get in, because actually it was causing me quite a lot of stress looking to find somewhere, because realizing that actually there isn't anywhere outside of campus that is going to really be completely accessible. So this opportunity came up and I kind of went for it. Now I've had that experience. If I was back then, I would have said no, actually, and would have looked at perhaps more halls of residence, or they had a place called Broadgate Park, which, you know, a lot of the students live there as well. I perhaps would have gone there because they're geared up to meeting your needs and making any changes, and it's just all round better.
I mean, so was that an option? Did they have any kind of like disabled adapted accommodation, the university, that you could use in your second year?
Yeah, they would have, but I think I didn't perhaps seek the advice that I needed, because I didn't actually really know how to go about it, because I was so fixated on, you know, most of your friends are moving out, and obviously why wouldn't you want to do the same thing?
Yeah.
But I think in hindsight, actually I would have been more comfortable and happier if I'd chosen somewhere that was suited for my needs. I perhaps didn't jump to thinking, oh, you know, I mean, obviously everyone wants to move out, but, you know, perhaps be a bit more realistic and think, actually, is this going to work?
I think it's always a tricky one. I think when I was at university, I stayed in the student accommodation, but then I guess I always had the thought in the back of my mind that it would have been nice to kind of experience moving out of campus with friends. So I think it's always difficult to decide what's best. And I think you know, pluses and minuses on both sides, really.
Definitely.
Cool. And so yeah, how did you manage with kind of university life? Is that something that you enjoyed?
I definitely enjoyed it, and I'd say I'm quite confident and self-assured in myself, so that helped. That helped me with just going out on a night out at university and not you know, not putting myself off doing that. You know, I was always looking for opportunities and what I could do at uni, and trying not to limit myself. And also, I didn't need that much support in first year or second year, really. It was only in my